Take a look at this CCTV clip from a convenience store in Kalamazoo, Michigan. The timestamp reads 9:14 p.m. Date June 23, 2018. A young woman steps out of the passenger side of a sedan. Her name is Ania Monye Mack, 24 years old, a college student. She moves with the quiet confidence of someone whose life is going exactly according to plan. This is a woman who's got goals, clear, ambitious, and built from hard work. She walks under the flickering fluorescent lights to grab a few snacks. Nothing unusual, nothing dramatic. But what nobody realizes in that moment is that this short trip will become part of her final recorded hours alive. Inside the car, her boyfriend, Donovan Lewis, waits behind the wheel. The camera can't see his face, but the tension is there. Heavy, invisible, growing. Over the next 24 hours, that tension will explode into something beyond anyone's imagination. This is one of the last images ever taken of Ania alive, right before she vanished into a storm of domestic conflict that ended in murder. Ania's life was proof of pure determination. She wasn't the kind of person who drifted through life. She built every piece of it herself. Born and raised in Muskegon Heights, an industrial town by Lake Michigan, she stood out early for her leadership and discipline. In high school, her record was impressive. Member of the National Honor Society, captain of the Majorette Squad, part of the cheerleading team, and an honors student through and through. That discipline paid off when she earned her way into Western Michigan University, majoring in psychology. A perfect match for her natural empathy and curiosity about people. And she didn't just study it, she lived it. She worked with children on the autism spectrum, using patience and compassion that left a mark on everyone she met. To her family and friends, she was a light, a bright, magnetic force whose energy could fill a room. She was the type of person everyone believed would go far. Her GPA sat proudly at 3.8, but those numbers only told part of the story. Her real success was how she made people feel, seen, heard, and cared for. Ania had a plan. She dreamed of helping others, maybe opening her own practice one day. She was responsible, organized, and emotionally grounded. So when she disappeared, it didn't fit any version of who she was. This wasn't someone who'd just walk away from her life, ghost her family, or miss work without a word. And that's what makes the next part of her story so haunting. Because when a person like that suddenly goes silent, you know something's terribly wrong. Think about that for a second. We all have cameras, texts, social media, digital footprints that track our every move. But sometimes, the last time you're seen alive isn't in a family photo or a message thread. It's a grainy frame from a security camera outside a gas station. That's where Ania's story begins, and where her normal life ends. On paper, Ania Mack's life looked perfect, focused, stable, and full of promise. But behind that image was one unpredictable variable: her relationship with Donovan Lewis. At first glance, they seemed like the kind of couple people envy. He was 25, tall, athletic, a former college basketball player with a charming smile. She was smart, goal-driven, and beautiful in that effortless way that made people pay attention. Together, they looked like success. But behind closed doors, things were falling apart. Donovan's basketball career hadn't gone the way he'd hoped. While Ania was building her future, his felt like it was slipping through his hands. That gap, her progress versus his frustration, started to eat at him. Friends would later tell police that his pride couldn't handle it. The more she succeeded, the smaller he felt. And that's when control started to creep in. At first, it looked like concern. He'd call to check if she got home safe or text to see who she was with. Harmless, right? But soon it turned into constant phone calls, angry messages if she didn't reply fast enough, and demands to prove where she was. When she missed a call because she was in class or at work, he'd accuse her of lying. Her phone stopped being hers. It became a tool he used to keep her under his watch. Every text from a male friend became proof of betrayal. Every outing with girlfriends turned into an argument. He'd say things like, "You don't need them, you've got me," or Your family doesn't get us. Slowly, he isolated her, making himself the center of her world while convincing her that everyone else was against them. People around Anya started to notice the change. The confident, outspoken woman they knew was shrinking, quieter, anxious, always second-guessing herself. When friends expressed concern, she brushed it off. "He's just stressed," she'd say. "He doesn't mean it like that." She studied psychology. She understood behavior patterns. But when it came to her own relationship, she couldn't apply that logic. She thought she could help him, fix him, love him into being better. What she didn't realize was that this wasn't a man having a bad week. This was a man with a deep, dangerous need to control. Their arguments became more frequent, louder, sharper. Neighbors would later say they often heard raised voices but assumed it was just normal couple stuff. Nobody stepped in. Nobody thought it could lead to something fatal. By June 24th, 2018, the tension reached its peak. That night, the fight wasn't about the dishes or money. It was about jealousy. Donovan accused her of having a relationship with a local pastor, twisting a friendship into something sinister inside his own mind. That argument would be their last. And here's the thing. People always think they'll recognize when a relationship crosses the line. But it doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow build. The calls, the control, the isolation. Until one night, it's not just an argument anymore. On the night of June 24th, the walls of their Kalamazoo apartment became silent witnesses to the breaking point of months of tension. What started as another heated argument quickly turned violent. Later, Donovan Lewis would tell investigators he lost control. But that's not what really happened. This wasn't a sudden burst of rage. It was the end result of jealousy, resentment, and the desperate need to dominate. At some point during that fight, Donovan struck Ania. The blow was hard enough to knock her to the floor, leaving her unconscious. Right there, he had a choice. He could have called for help, tried to save her, but instead, he crossed a line he could never take back. Investigators would later describe his next moves as cold and deliberate. He walked into the kitchen, opened a drawer, and picked up a knife. He didn't grab it in panic. He selected it. Then, standing over her, he committed the act that turned domestic violence into murder. The rest of that night was a blur of control, not chaos. Once the adrenaline faded, fear kicked in, but not guilt. He wasn't afraid of what he'd done. He was afraid of being caught. He didn't call the cops. He didn't reach out to family. Instead, he started thinking like someone cleaning up a mess. He needed to get rid of the evidence. Her body. Inside the apartment, he found a large suitcase. Think about that. Something meant for travel, vacations, new beginnings, now turned into something horrific. He placed her body inside, zipped it up, and paused to plan his next step. At first, his idea was simple. Dump the suitcase in a trash bin outside the building. He hauled it out under the cover of darkness, tossed it into a dumpster, and walked away like it was over. But paranoia hit fast. What if someone noticed? What if the trash collectors found it too heavy? What if a stranger opened it? So he went back, pulled the suitcase out, brought it back into his apartment. Now he was living in the same space as what he'd done, with the body of the woman he claimed to love just a few feet away. The next day, June 25th, he came up with a new plan. He called his mother, told her he needed to borrow her van to move some things. She said yes, because why wouldn't she? He picked up the van, waited for nightfall, loaded the suitcase, and started driving east toward Comstock Charter Township, a rural area most people wouldn't bother visiting. He knew about a small creek there, Comstock Creek. Quiet, hidden, the kind of place where secrets could disappear. Under the cover of trees and darkness, he dragged the suitcase to the water's edge and pushed it in. The current was slow. The suitcase sank. Just like that, he thought the problem was gone. He drove home, cleaned the van, returned it to his mother, and rehearsed his story. The one where he was just a worried boyfriend, waiting for his girlfriend to come home after a fight. You ever notice how killers always think they're smarter than everyone else? They think they can plan, hide, erase. But no matter how careful they are, they always leave something behind. Sometimes it's a fingerprint. Sometimes it's a lie that doesn't line up. And sometimes it's data, quietly saving their every move. The first few days after Anya disappeared were filled with something everyone who's ever lost someone dreads. That uneasy quiet that doesn't make sense. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Messages piled up without the little read mark. For her friends and family, that silence wasn't normal. It was terrifying. Anya wasn't the type to vanish. She was always connected, texting friends, checking in with her mom, posting updates. When the hours turned into a full day, then two, everyone started realizing something was seriously wrong. At first, people tried to explain it away. Maybe she needed a break. Maybe she was visiting a friend. But when she didn't show up for work at the autism center, a job she loved, those excuses fell apart. Missing work without notice just wasn't who she was. By June 28th, her employer called her friends to ask if she was okay. That call set everything in motion. Her circle of friends went straight to the Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety, insisting something bad had happened. At first, police treated it like most adult disappearances. Maybe she left voluntarily. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. But her friends didn't back down. Their persistence forced police to take a closer look. Officers were dispatched to the apartment she shared with Donovan Lewis. What they found inside wasn't dramatic. No blood, no signs of a fight. Everything looked too normal. The kitchen still had a half-finished cup of coffee on the table. A textbook lay open on the couch. The TV was on. But beneath that surface normalcy, small details screamed that something was off. The bathtub was filled with cold water, like someone had started to run a bath and just walked away. Her car was still outside, but the license plates had been switched onto another, almost identical car parked nearby. That wasn't a mistake. That was someone trying to confuse anyone looking. And the only person on site to talk to was Donovan. He played his part flawlessly. Calm, polite, worried boyfriend mode activated. He told officers they'd argued, that she stormed out to cool off, and that this kind of thing had happened before. His story sounded clean, easy to believe. There was no evidence to hold him, no reason to arrest. Police left that night uneasy, but their hands were tied. Without a body, without signs of foul play, all they could do was open a missing person report. Days turned into a week. The silence grew heavier. Friends started posting on social media, organizing searches, calling hospitals, but nothing. No sightings, no activity on her bank cards, no digital movement. That's the part nobody talks about, the gap between the crime and the proof. When someone vanishes, it's not like in the movies. There's just waiting. The world keeps going, but for the people who care, time stops. And for investigators, every hour that passes without answers means one thing. Whatever happened, it's not good. And somewhere out there, Donovan Lewis was watching it all unfold, pretending to be just another person hoping she'd come home. Days turned into weeks, and hope was fading fast. Everyone wanted to believe Anya would just walk through the door, that this was all a misunderstanding. But deep down, they knew she wasn't coming home. Without witnesses, without a body, detectives were running out of leads. Donovan's story, that she walked out after an argument, was shaky, but it was all they had, and on paper, it held up. No physical evidence, no crime scene, just a missing woman and a boyfriend who played calm and cooperative. But one detective couldn't shake the feeling that Donovan's story was too perfect. You know that gut feeling investigators talk about, the one that tells you something isn't right even when everything looks clean. That's what kept him going. If the physical world was silent, maybe the digital one wasn't. He filed for a warrant to access Donovan's cell phone data, GPS logs, cell tower pings, everything. It took time to get approval, but once the data came in, it told a story Donovan never meant to share. On June 24th, the night Anya vanished, Donovan's phone wasn't sitting still at home like he'd claimed. The GPS showed movement, a steady, deliberate drive east out of Kalamazoo, straight toward Comstock Charter Township, the same quiet area where he'd dumped the suitcase. The route matched perfectly with the timeline of Anya's disappearance. The phone stayed there for a while, long enough for him to drag the suitcase into the water, and then headed straight back. He probably thought deleting texts and wiping surfaces would cover his tracks. But phones don't lie. They record every move, every second, every tower connection. The digital ghost of his actions betrayed him. When detectives confronted him again, it wasn't a casual conversation anymore. They printed out a map, red line tracing his route from home to Comstock Creek and back, and laid it in front of him. The room got quiet. Donovan tried to deny it. He said maybe someone else had his phone. Maybe the GPS was wrong. But the data was solid. Timestamps, coordinates, signal strength. He realized he was trapped by his own technology. And that's when he broke. He confessed, not to an accident, not to a moment of panic, but to everything. The fight, the knife, the suitcase, the creek. The story he'd spent days rehearsing collapsed in minutes under the weight of his own digital footprint. It's crazy, isn't it? We think of technology as protection, proof of innocence, but it's also the one witness that never sleeps, never forgets, and never changes its story. In this case, it became the voice for someone who could no longer speak for herself. Ania's silence ended the moment her killer's phone started talking. After his confession, Donovan Lewis stopped being a concerned boyfriend and officially became the man responsible for Ania's death. His own words filled in every missing piece of the puzzle. The argument, the violence, the suitcase, the creek. He didn't even try to deny it anymore. He agreed to show investigators where he dumped her body. So one gray morning, detectives, a forensic team, and Lewis, cuffed, silent, head down, drove out to Comstock Creek. The scene was quiet, surrounded by trees and thick water plants. He pointed to a spot along the bank where the current slowed down. Divers went in, searching through cold, murky water. Minutes later, one of them raised a hand. The signal. They found it. The suitcase had lodged itself in the mud at the bottom of the creek. When it was pulled to the surface and opened, the truth that everyone already feared became undeniable. Inside were the remains of Ania Monye Mack. Her friends and family finally had answers. But no peace. Finding her didn't bring closure. It just confirmed their worst nightmare. The trial came fast. There was no drama, no surprise witnesses. With the confession, the digital evidence, and physical recovery of her body, the prosecution's case was airtight. In September 2019, knowing a jury would almost certainly convict him of first-degree murder, a life sentence with no chance of parole, Lewis took a plea deal. He pled guilty to second-degree murder. A month later, the judge delivered the sentence, 25 to 40 years in prison. And before handing it down, the judge said something that hit everyone in that courtroom hard. Her body should never have been treated like trash. Even then, Donovan showed no real remorse. Not long after being locked up, he tried to escape. Failed, of course. But that stunt said everything about who he really was. No respect for life, law, or accountability. For Ania's family, the sentence meant justice on paper, but not in the heart. During the hearing, Her mother stood up and read a statement through tears. Instead of hearing her voice again, I have to write about Donovan Lewis. There won't be a graduation, no wedding, no grandkids. Just this. That moment broke the courtroom. Ania's story didn't just end there, though. Her death sparked conversations far beyond Michigan about domestic violence, control, and the red flags people too often overlook. News outlets covered it not as another crime, but as a warning that abuse doesn't always start with bruises. Sometimes it starts with phone checks, jealousy, and isolation. If you take anything from this story, let it be this. Love shouldn't make you feel small or scared or trapped. Control isn't care. Jealousy isn't love. And when someone starts taking away your world piece by piece, it's not because they're protecting you. It's because they're preparing to own you. Anya's life was full of light and purpose. That light was stolen, but her story still shines, as a voice for every person who never got the chance to speak up before it was too late.